Welcome class 7 for your next class of literature in English. We shall continue with the same poem, The Cherry Tree, written by Ruskin Bond. Before we move on to critically analyze the poem, let us recall what we had done in the previous video. In the video, we saw the explanation of the poem, where the poet recalls about his time of 8 years ago when he had planted a cherry tree. Being a child, he was very happy to see a newborn plant and watered it daily as it was summertime. As the sapling was surrounded by wild grass, it was often visited by goats and grass cutters. At times, the goat ate its leaves and the grass cutter chopped it unknowingly. The poet used to get disheartened, but he waited patiently and was overjoyed to see its new shoots in the springtime. When it rained in the monsoon season, the cherry plant grew into a tree and bore one single cherry on it. But the next year, it was overloaded with cherries. Poet enjoyed the shade of his own cherry tree and witnessed that it was visited not only by him but also by a number of birds and insects. In the end of the poem, the poet loved talking about nature, as he had been able to nurture a tree of his own that was a home for a number of birds and insects. Through the poem, The Cherry Tree, Ruskin Bond tries to highlight the theme of struggle, dedication, conflict, growth, responsibility, and pride. Through the poem, he also tries to symbolize the consequences of our good deeds. When we sow the seed of good deeds, these good deeds grow into big tree. Like the cherry tree. Initially, it was threatened by goats and grass cutter, and at times by the monsoon blight. But the cherry tree endured all the hardships and finally blossomed. Similarly, we should not give up our good habits until they become a part and parcel of our life and give happiness to others. In the poem, the poet depicts a small action of planting cherry tree, which leads to a great achievement of giving happiness and benefits to the birds and insects along with the poet. As the poet faced a number of difficulties while growing a cherry tree, it is evident that the poem is set in the foothills of Himalayas, where the poet lived with his grandfather in a small cottage. Occasionally, the poet visited his parents in Kashmir to help them in ancestral terrace farming. Ruskin Bond wrote poems for children in the form of a story that was very easy to understand. Thus, this is a narrative and nature poem that describes the struggle of a cherry sapling into a big tree. In the previous poems, children, I had made you aware about the different poetic devices. Ruskin Bond was not only a great nature lover, but also a great poet. He has made use of a number of figures of speech in his poems. In this poem, The Cherry Tree, he makes use of alliteration and personification. Alliteration is the repetition of the consonant sound in the same line or in a phrase. The first example is, its arm in the fresh fairest lust. In this, the consonant sound F is repeated. The second example, made a miracle from green growing pain. In this, the sound G and M is repeated rhythmically. He has also made use of personification, where he has given the qualities of a human being to his tree, the cherry tree. The first example is, a tree had come to stay. He gives the qualities of a human being to his tree, which had come to stay with him. The second example, its arms in the fresh fairest lust. The tree has been described to have arms like human beings. Thus, Ruskin Bond has made use of poetic devices in order to beautify his poem. Children, I hope you have understood the poem well and would be able to do the reference of the cherry tree on your own. Thank you. Have a nice day.